and welcome to Make Every Mile a Memory, a reading and presentation with BJ and Henry Hollars on Go West, Young Man, a father and son rediscover America on the Oregon Trail. My name is Diane, and I work at the Johnson County Library. I'll be facilitating tonight's program while my colleague Hannah Jane will be monitoring the chat. Okay, now let's get into it. I am so happy to introduce tonight's speakers. BJ Hollars is the author of several books, the most recent of which is Go West, Young Man, a father and son rediscover America on the Oregon Trail. His work has been featured in The Washington Post, Parents Magazine, NPR, and elsewhere. He's the recipient of the Truman Capote Prize for Literary Nonfiction, the Ann B. and James B. McMillan Prize, and the Council of Wisconsin Writers Blythe Derleth Award, among others. He is currently an associate professor of English at the University of Wisconsin-Eau Claire. Henry Hollars is the illustrator of Go West, Young Man, and his work has been featured on the Family Refrigerator and elsewhere. He is the family record holder for highest jump on the backyard trampoline, and additionally, he has endured a 2,500-mile road trip with his father. And with that, I will turn it over to BJ and Henry.
Well, thank you so much, Diane and Hannah Jane and Helen, very far behind the scenes. And hello, everyone, and welcome to BJ and Henry
and BJ's
Reading and Conversation about our new book, Go West, Young Man, a father and son. Son and father. Rediscover America on the Oregon Trail. Now, the 2 weeks recounted in this book were the best 2 weeks of our lives.
His life.
And that concludes most of our pre-planned shtick. But on a far more serious note, we want to just take a moment to acknowledge that here in our home of Eau Claire, Wisconsin, we are on the sacred and ancestral land of the Ojibwe and Dakota people. Prior to our journey, we might have overlooked such important information, but we know better now. And being mindful of our past and our place within it is but one of the many lessons we learned throughout our 2,500-mile road trip from Eau Claire, Wisconsin to Oregon's Willamette Valley. Now, for those of you whose knowledge of the Oregon Trail doesn't extend much beyond that oh-so-famous computer game in which we all shot more meat than we could carry, forded the river when we should have taken the ferry, and eventually died of dysentery, allow me to give you a very abridged version of the real history. You see, between 1846 and 1869, the Oregon Trail transported some 400,000 immigrants to the West Coast. Some traveled for gold and God, others for farmland beyond the Rockies. Most immigrants were middle class, not so rich that they were satisfied with what they had, but not so poor that they couldn't afford to outfit a wagon for the journey ahead. Over 25 years, some 65,000 immigrants died along the way. That's the entire population of our town of Eau Claire, which is why today the Oregon Trail is often called the world's longest graveyard. By some estimates, a body was buried every 80 yards along the way. So that's the history, or at least a little of it. But what Henry and I will talk about tonight is the contemporary story, our story, what we discovered about ourselves and our country while retracing the trail 150 years later. So, to begin, why, Henry, following the final bell on the last day of kindergarten, did we decide to embark upon this journey to retrace the Oregon Trail?
Well, because you made me.
Because I made him. And one day he'll thank me for it. As for why I struck out on this trail, it was my last chance to steer us clear of the trappings of 21st century technology. For too long, I found myself clicking and swiping and scrolling my way through my days and losing cherished minutes with my son. I wanted to take us to a place where we couldn't even get cell phone reception. And on occasion, we even found those places. But the other reason was because I hoped to rediscover America and Americans along the way. While a part of me hoped to reaffirm my conviction for what I believed to be the promise of America, another part strove to do the harder thing, unsaddle my high horse, stand down from my soapbox, and allow the opening salvo to a conversation rather than the final word. Easier said than done, but easier done too in the presence of a child. In the fall of 1960, John Steinbeck drove his camper truck cross-country to answer a similar question. What are Americans like today? Fully aware of his daunting charge, Steinbeck solicited the help of an unlikely sidekick.
A French poodle named Charlie.
A French poodle named Charlie. Quote, in establishing contact with strange people, Charlie is my ambassador, Steinbeck wrote. I release him and he drifts toward the objective, or rather, to whatever the objective may be preparing for dinner. By breaking down social barriers, Charlie more than earned his keep. A child can do the same thing, Steinbeck added, but a dog is better. Maybe in most cases, but John Steinbeck never met Henry Hollars, who was our secret weapon in diffusing tense situations. People, thankfully, still think twice before being a total jerk in front of a child. And now begins the indulgent family photo book portion of the evening, starting with the two of us posing here in Alcove Springs, Kansas, site of where the Donna Reed party slept and where they saw their first casualty, 70-year-old Sarah Keyes, whose body is still buried somewhere, no one quite knows where, just beyond the swales in this photograph. And here he is at Chimney Rock, where Henry's hair is doing a pretty spot-on impression of the rock itself. You can't make this stuff up, just a wonderful photo. This is one of the more geologically recognizable features along the trail. It was the rock that allowed immigrants to sigh a big breath of relief, knowing that they were indeed moving in the right direction. Here he is at the top of Independence Rock, another major geological wonder along the way. It's admittedly a big chunk of granite, about 130 feet high, 1,900 feet wide, nicknamed the Register of the Desert for the 40 to 50,000 immigrant names that were etched along its face, allowing historians years later to go back and figure out who actually sat upon this rock during their own journey. Here we are at Scotts Bluff, another well-known feature along the trail. One geologist called Chimney Rock the most sublime rock formation along the trail, and Scotts Bluff the largest and grandest monument of them all. An immigrant described them with a little more flair, calling Chimney Rock a haystack with a pole, and Scotts Bluff an old castle with a rounding top. One of my favorite photos from the whole trip. This is Henry walking in the remaining wagon ruts created by the wagon trains in Guernsey, Wyoming here. So for me, these ruts are perhaps the best geological reminder of the sheer magnitude of the tens of thousands of wagons that, again, through 1846 to 1869, traveled this very stretch of land, this very narrow stretch of land, and literally left their story in the rock face as well. Finally, we got these guys right here getting a little goofy by trip's end, but truly it was just a great trip. And if we could have taken you with us, we would have. But since we can't, we're going to try to recreate a portion of that trip for you this evening. So sit back and relax, and we will now read three quick scenes from the greatest 2 weeks of our lives.
His life.
One day he's going to thank you. So this first scene opens on our first night of camping in Nebraska's Grand Island KOA. At around 2 a.m., I wake to the sound of the wind. At first, it's nothing more than a gentle breeze rippling against the nylon tent, but soon those ripples become rattles, and as those rattles increase in speed, I am reminded of what I forgot to do: stake down the tent. Henry, get your butt up, it's storming. Come on, let's get out of here. Disoriented, Henry spends the next 3 minutes trying to unzip himself from his sleeping bag and back into his Ninja Turtle onesie. After freeing himself from the former, he traps himself in the latter, hopping on one foot while searching for a foothold. Meanwhile, I unthread the tent poles from their holders, collapsing the tent and nearly trapping Henry inside. It occurs to me that we are performing the world's worst Laurel and Hardy routine. And it occurs to me, too, that much of this might have been avoided had I bothered to check the weather radar or stake down the tent or enact any number of cautionary measures. I don't waste time refolding the tent. Instead, as the storm pounds down, I gather it in my arms and toss it in the Jeep's trunk. Henry trails just one step behind, slipping into a sliver of open seat in the back. You okay?
No.
No?
My hat. I lost my hat.
Not just any hat, but a bright red, big-billed talisman upon which was stitched a creature of indeterminate origin. We'd snagged it at a thrift store a few months back, which gave Henry plenty of time to grow impossibly attached to it. The thought of losing it now, so early in our trip, is more than I can bear. I prepare myself to brave the storm in search of what's gone missing. But before I even open the car door, I spot a woman's silhouette sprinting toward us. She has a perfect runner's stride, head down, Arms pumping, her legs a pair of pistons at full tilt. Backlit by lightning, the woman reaches our passenger side door. Arm raised, she reveals the red hat in her hand. "Is this yours?" she hollers over the sound of the wind. I jump out of the driver's seat and run toward her, gripping the soggy hat in my hands. "Thank you," I shout. "No problem," she shouts back. For a moment, we stare at each other as if trying to retrace all the decisions that somehow led us to this moment. We both know we'll never see each other again, but also that in this instance, we see each other fully. In the 30 seconds we share, I come to know her like a sister. Would you believe me if I told you that I read her entire biography in the contours of her rain-slicked face, and that she came to know my own story similarly? Yet rather than admit to such a miracle, we simply retreat to the safety of our shelter. "Buddy, look what the lady found," I say, returning to the driver's seat and handing the hat back to him.
Thanks.
He's back to snoring within seconds. So we were pretty green back then, kind of making rookie mistakes everywhere we went. But over the next 10 days, we began to learn from those mistakes. And we learned new lessons at Fort Laramie and Chimney Rock, Independence Rock, and so many places in between. But beyond the history lessons, we also learned a bit about the nature of our own relationship.
Like how my dad freaks out over dumb stuff.
Like how I sometimes freaked out over what seems like dumb stuff now, but didn't seem so dumb in the moment, I assure you. So we're going to slip ahead here to a new scene that took place several days later in the deserts of Idaho. After concluding a brief stop at Register Rock, Henry and I hop back into the car in preparation for the final 200-mile leg to Boise. Yet upon starting the engine, I notice an unfamiliar message scrolling along the Jeep's display screen. Well, that's weird.
What's weird?
The screen says, "Oil change recommended."
What's that mean?
Well, if forced to wager a guess, outside the brown desert sizzles at a sweat-inducing 91 degrees. Though inside the vehicle, the temperature gauge climbs even higher.
What do we do?
We sit tight. Nothing to worry about. Yet. Cut to my nightmare. A red-headed vulture soaring over our vehicle, followed by Henry and me dragging our dehydrated bodies through the rattlesnake-infested desert, gasping for water as the sun sinks over the cacti. In an attempt to avoid such a fate, I pull the car and drive, merging into traffic while glancing the mighty Snake River off to our left. The mere sight of it reminds Henry that he's thirsty.
Dad, can I drink from this water bottle?
Sure, just screw the cap back on when you're done.
No problem. Dad,
Yeah?
I can't get the cap on.
What do you mean?
I mean, it won't go on.
Calm down. Everything's going to be, at that moment, a new message scrawls across the Jeep screen. Oil change required. Henry, I need you just to figure it out for yourself.
But Dad!
Look, I'm going 80 miles an hour here, and apparently we now require an oil change, so I need you to do the one thing that I can't do for you right now. I need you to screw on the cap.
But I tried.
Henry, you're 6 years old. You're a kindergarten graduate. I know you can do it. Henry gives it another try, though when he catches me glowering in the rear view, any last vestige of water bottle cap twisting confidence immediately vanishes. What follows are the longest 2 minutes of our lives. It's not like you're cracking a safe, Henry.
It won't go on.
It's all about the threading. Just match the threading on the cap to the threading on the bottle.
I am.
Henry, you survived a storm, remember? And you climbed to the top of Independence Rock. You swam in a hot spring. You explored a cave. You can do this. Just turn it to the left.
That's what I am doing.
In hindsight, I probably should have just screwed on the cap. How easy it would have been to pull to the side of the road, guide him through the careful art of water bottle cap screwing, and then continue on our way. Instead, I take another approach, screaming at the top of my lungs. Henry, someday Daddy's not going to be here to do it for you. Don't you understand? I'm trying to make you self-sufficient. I'm trying to prepare you for this unforgiving, God-forsaken world.
Wait, when are you not going to be here for?
Rather than engage in a candid discussion on the average human lifespan, I begin a glorious backpedaling. Like when you go off to college or whatever.
Oh, I thought you were dying.
Let's just focus on the cap for now. All you have to do is turn it to the left. Please, show me you can do it. Summoning a bit of magic we could have used 5 minutes ago, at last the threads align.
I did it!
Darn right you did.
The problem was you told me to turn left, but I actually had to turn right.
I realize he may be onto something, but rather than fess up and lose credibility forever, I do the fatherly thing and lie like a rug. No, I meant my right, which is your left.
But that doesn't make any sense.
He convulses with laughter. All right, how about this? I was teaching you a valuable lesson.
Don't drink water?
No, never under any circumstances listen to your father. In the time it takes most people to screw on a water bottle cap, our lowest moment becomes our highest. Henry cackles at my stupidity. Since it beats crying, we laugh until the road runs out. We leave the dust behind, the ghosts behind, and make that mile a memory too. So you're probably wondering what happened with the car. We kind of smoked our way into Boise, went to the nearest Jiffy Lube we could find, and there we met a guy named Dave. Dave heard it was a rental vehicle. He was not thrilled about dealing with the rental vehicle. He assured me we were never going to get reimbursed for it. He was kind of persnickety about the whole thing. And so we just explained to him, look, we're a father-son duo. We are retracing the Oregon Trail. We're going to try to write a book on this. We just need some help. We got to get to the coast. And Dave kind of looked at us, kind of eyed us over, gave me the keys, and went back and did whatever magic mechanics do. He came back 15 minutes later, said he topped her off, whatever that means, and that we'd be in good shape and we'd make it to the coast. And when I asked him, what do we owe you? He said, nothing. I just want you to have a great trip. And moments like that happened throughout the trip. It was incredible how often people went out of their way to be generous to us. And I'll say a little more about that during the Q&A portion of this evening as well. But there's one other pretty cool thing that you'll be happy to know about too. Henry forgave me my little water bottle cap incident freak out. And in fact, a few days later on Father's Day morning, we woke early. I woke him up and he popped out of bed, jumped out of the sleeping bag, ran me to the Jeep and told me to unlock it because he wanted to give me this composition book, which he had been writing in throughout our entire trip, drawing these little sketches of monsters and stuff. He never let me actually see it during the whole trip. He was always kind of secretly doing stuff back there. And later I understood why. What were you doing the whole time, Henry?
I was writing him a book for Father's Day.
He was writing me a book for Father's Day. So here I was thinking I was the one writing the book about the Oregon Trail. And in fact, the best writer was in the back seat writing me this incredible book for Father's Day. And so
more of like a piece of art.
There's a lot of art. There's some art. There's some illustrations as well. But this page in particular, it really gets me every time. And in fact, it's not even in his own handwriting. He was talking to some stranger at a bookstore, this middle-aged woman. It was a little weird. I wasn't sure what to make of it. But she helped him write this passage for Father's Day for me. Dad, he writes, I like when you draw a big world with me. I like when you take me out and we go and do stuff together, which is really sweet. And then the next line, that my sister can't do. Yeah, which is really on point.
Do you think she could hear that?
Maybe she heard. But we really enjoyed that moment. It was one of those rare treats and unexpected things that occurred, of the many unexpected things that occurred throughout. So days later, we at last reach our final destination, the Oregon Coast Nehalem Bay State Park. After nearly 2 decades felt like 2 decades, after 2 weeks on the open road, we are more than a little ready for the ocean. We reach the ocean, and we're just about ready to give our 26 years old now. We just about are ready to say goodbye to the trip and farewell to our good time together. So here's a final scene from the book. On our final afternoon, we go for one last walk along the shores of the Pacific. Well, bud, I say as the sun sinks low, I think it's time we head back.
You mean home?
Well, soon, but for now, I just mean back to the tent.
Oh, for a minute I thought you meant home, but I do want to go home.
Me too. Though we'd never have admitted it earlier, by our second to last day, home is the only destination we desire. After all these days and all these miles, at last, we have run out of things to talk about. No more lessons to tender or receive, no more adventures to embark upon. Overhead, I hear a squall, and upon lifting my gaze, I lay eyes upon the most cliche creature that this moment could possibly have conjured. Here at the end of our journey to rediscover America, we see a bald eagle soaring, majestically no less. Are you kidding me? I shout toward the sky. Surely this bird has been pulled from central casting, a near perfect end to a near perfect trip. I shake my head at the wonder of it all. How in moments like this, the world is simply too much. As the eagle concludes its air show and fades into the horizon, Henry turns to me.
Dad,
Yeah?
I think,
You think what?
I just think.
Buddy, it's okay. You can tell me. This is the moment I've been waiting for. Not some eagle soaring, manufactured, made for TV moment, but the one in which my unconditional love for my son is made clear to him and his is made clear to me. This is the moment that will forever bind us to some unknown plane, one half as high as heaven and twice as deep as the Platte River. Henry looks at me, drawing upon his wellspring of strength.
I think.
Yes, my son, what is it?
Well, I think I'm finally sick of you.
I smile, sigh, slap an arm around his not so small shoulders. You know, bud, I think I'm finally sick of you too. And what better place to end the reading than the most honest place of all? Before we go to Q&A, I do want to share a few more things. You've learned a lot about Henry as the co-pilot and the sidekick, but you probably didn't know that he's also the illustrator of this book, the actual illustrator. So here he is the day the copies arrived. He was pretty enthusiastic, I think it's safe to say. And we've got a couple more images to share with you of some of the other fine art you can find in this collection here, mostly throwing shade at his father. As you can see in that first one, it's the moment he's giving me the composition book. I think it says, Dad, in parentheses, crying like a baby. Am I right on that? Crying like a baby. It was dusty in there that morning, that's all. And then the second one, there we are, climbing Chimney Rock, which we did not actually do, but you can see that I'm clearly labeled falling off the side of Chimney Rock. And what are those things chasing after me there?
Snake.
Those are rattlesnakes. So also didn't happen, thank goodness. There we are at Zoo Boise. Went to the Boise Zoo for a couple days, saw a sloth bear. That was pretty exciting. And then again, one of those more momentous moments when we reached the top of Independence Rock. Again, there wasn't like a good trail. I promised him we were going to climb to the top, but there was really no way to get there, and we just kind of went for it.
And if anybody here works at Independence Rock, we definitely didn't climb
We
it.
totally did not. We were just keeping a safe distance, and everything was above board. And actually, earlier when Diane mentioned the Washington Post piece, that's what that piece was all about. It was about trying to decide, was it worth the risk, of climbing to the top of this big old rock in the kind of the middle of nowhere. And ultimately it was for us. That risk made for the best memory of all, perhaps. So there are a few other things I want to share with you. First, we are at the start of our book tour. Tomorrow night, I'll be doing a Travel Writing for Dummies talk right here through the Johnson County Library, so you can sign up for that. And then we'll be in Topeka, if anyone knows any Topeka people, on Thursday. And then on Friday, we'll be in Lincoln at Francie and Finch. And then finally, one more workshop virtually available for you to attend on Saturday morning through the Johnson County Library. Two other quick notes I like to work into the presentation. We call this presentation Make Every Mile a Memory, which is a really nice ring to it. I just really love that as an idea. And certainly it became the ethos of our whole trip, trying to make every mile a memory, even the tough memories, But we actually got that line from a pretty interesting place. Do you remember?
Well, I wasn't there because it was my last day of kindergarten,
right.
But it was you found it on a dump truck.
I saw it on a dump truck. I was driving out to the airport to get a rental vehicle for our trip. I was really nervous, really amped up. And there on the back of this enormous dump truck was this bumper sticker. I mean, it was perfectly timed. Had I waited for one more red light, I would have missed this forever. But instead it became the centerpiece of the whole book. And of course it just said, make every mile a memory. And if a dump truck knows that, I figured we should know that too. And so certainly that became a big part of our adventure.
Yeah, we're never going to forget that sticker. I feel like you should order one.
We should make t-shirts or something. Yeah, totally. Earlier, we kind of talked about some lessons too that we learned along the way and how nice everyone was to us. And that's very much true. I mean, we would go to a place and Henry would strike up a conversation. And by the end of that conversation, they were throwing $5 his way for souvenirs. I mean, we were really working the crowd.
I'm hello. Oh, thank you.
Yeah, he was really working the crowd. Make sure you get in the screen there, buddy. But on that last night in Portland, right before the composition book moment, a friend of mine said, well, I'm really glad you had a great trip. I'm glad everyone's so nice to you. But had you considered how your trip might be different if you weren't a straight white guy with a 6-year-old in tow? And that really gave me pause, because this whole trip we were talking about, the complexities of westward travel, and of course, the horrors that were brought upon indigenous people as a result of this, much of which we get into in the book. But in all of that, we really hadn't taken a moment to fully reflect on, our own role and our own privilege, and how that had certainly changed the trip that we had ourselves. One of the more poignant moments for me, which we didn't read from, is kind of a downer moment, but we visited the grave of a young 6-year-old, a boy who was Henry's age, in fact, named Joel Hembry. This is deep in Converse County, Wyoming. We have a special guide to take us there. It's just a rock. But in the 1840s, he was crushed by a wagon wheel. His parents buried him right there and then never had a chance to go back and visit the grave. People died all the time on the trail, and you buried them, and then you just rolled on. And so Henry might be one of the only 6-year-olds in history, perhaps the only one to visit the grave of a fellow 6-year-old who passed away doing the same journey, just in a very different time and a very different means. So those are some of the highlights that I wanted to try to work in at some point. But now my favorite part of the presentation is when you get to ask us questions. We are here to serve. We've come a long way from upstairs to the basement, but we really are glad to spend this time with you.
That's like 13 steps.
13 to 15 steps for sure. So please type those questions in the chat, and Diane can help moderate if she'd like. And then if there's time that permits at the end, we have one final page I'd like to read to close. But if we have enough questions, that's great too. So we'll see where it goes.
All right. Thank you so much. That was an amazing presentation. If anyone has any questions for BJ or Henry, please go ahead and put them in the Q&A box. I had a question. I was wondering, what were some of your most memorable characters that you came across, memorable people?
Oh my gosh, that's it. I mean, that's the great question. Henry, anyone stand out for you and think about it? And I can jump in first while you're thinking if you prefer.
There's only like 1 or 2 people that I really remember, but it was that. Well, this guy we didn't talk to. He was just like, it was the guy who was giving us the ice cream. Like, you sure you want that many scoops?
Yes.
Are you sure?
Let me give you some backstory here. So we originally picked up a book by a woman who retraced the Oregon Trail herself, kind of a tour traveler's guide to the Oregon Trail kind of thing. So I got to know her, and we talked on the phone, and she said, when I was actually doing this for more of a travel guide purpose, my daughter's favorite part was going to Farson Mercantile. It's this ice cream cone as big as your head. I think I used to have the picture in my desk. And so we had to go like an hour out of our way to get these giant ice cream cones. And indeed, we have a picture of us with these enormous cones right outside the Farson Mercantile sign in the middle of nowhere. But when we got there, we ordered the double scoop. The 16-year-old behind the counter was a bit certain that we would not be able to handle our ice cream. And it became a really.
I handle ice cream.
He handled it just fine, but I was shocked at the.
Just like I had ice cream today.
Yeah, the kid likes his ice cream. He gets paid in ice cream. But yeah, indeed, they were pretty big scoops. So yes. Oh, we got some questions jumping in here. Wow. I don't know if I should take them in order or not. I see Mike Mitchell says, "Did you camp out all the way?" Great question. We
No.
more or less did, with the exception of 2 or 3 nights, right?
The exception of like 4 nights.
3 nights.
4.
3.
4.
Well, oh, you're right. The first night we did in Iowa. Well played. He keeps me honest. Just when we were getting going, we stopped in Iowa that first night at the end of kindergarten. And then after that whole storm situation in which Daddy did not get any sleep, there was this moment, another great moment, where we are filling up the gas tank in Sidney, Nebraska. I will always count my lucky stars for Sidney, Nebraska. We're filling up, and I look to my left, and I see this hotel, and there on the marquee, it just says pool. And it's so hot, and we're so tired. And I say, Henry, what if we just stopped here for the night?
And we're like, yeah, let's go.
It was the best. It was like the best choice we made, and actually kind of worked alongside what many of the original immigrants knew. If you go slow, if you pace yourself, you might have a chance. If you rush right through it, sickness occurs, animals get sick. So we like to think we made the right choice. And then in Boise, we took a night or two to kind of resettle, get our bearings, take a nice shower. But the most memorable nights indeed were camping alongside the creek in Mount Pillier and Douglas, Wyoming, and all these wonderful places, Grand Island, up along the way that really Casper, that really kind of made it a fun and memorable experience. We got one from Cindy here. Henry, what was your most favorite experience or moment?
The hot springs were really fun.
Yeah.
That was I loved no, my favorite time was when we were on the beach and we had like no food left because it was our last night. All we had is like Jello and like snack packs and stuff. Yeah. And we were just sitting on the sand dunes. That was our dinner. Yeah. And I loved jumping down from those because it was so high and it didn't hurt to jump down.
Yes, and I was looking back there, so we have a framed portrait on the wall, not the Starry Night one, but off to the left of some of these photos he's talking about. And indeed, we didn't tell Mom, but we kind of ran out of food on the last night of the beach, so we had a lot of Jello and pudding and summer sausage, and it got us through. So that was a really good moment, kind of the last night, kind of doing things our way for better or worse. And Sean asked, "Did you cook as you can?" We certainly tried our best, and it wasn't extensive. What happened? You tell us what you think happened, and I'll tell my version.
I think we ate out most of the time.
We did not.
But
I'm much too cheap for that.
Actually, we made hot dogs like half of the time.
Yes.
But it was hard because those were the same thing.
The first night, I remember I ate 4 hot dogs.
You ate 4, and I ate 3.
Yeah, it was a lot of hot dogs. But you just get so hungry these days. You have to understand, I didn't really think about the fact that I was traveling with a 6-year-old. So we would drive 350 miles, 400 miles some days, stop for 3 interviews along the way, hit up 2 museums. Like, it was so intensive. I just felt so bad at the end of most days that I just indulged in whatever I could to kind of get him through, We did have a lot of pudding. My favorite meal was the Douglas, Wyoming night. Remember that? We were just doing some putt-putt at a KOA, and then every time we finished a whole putt-putt, we just ate a big slice of summer sausage, and that was the whole meal. But those were kind of memorable moments. I think Douglas was one of our favorite places. We went back to the tent that night, read some Wayside Stories. Maybe some of you know that book.
It's the best. Book.
We had the best time just sitting in the tent and reading those books. And in our book, I refer to it as that was a deathbed day. I really think like on my final day in those final moments, I'm going to think about that moment in that tent in Douglas with Henry, reading that stupid book, and stomach full of summer sausage and a couple holes in one from the putt-putt.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I'm going to read you summer sausage, and I'm going to read Wayside Stories.
Well, this didn't get macabre at all, so thank you. Janet asks, besides the kindness and generosity of people you met, were there other things you discovered about Americans? Yeah, I have one. It's a moment I didn't fully write about. I think I touched on it briefly. It happened in, I think, Baker City or Oregon City or somewhere out there. It was Father's Day morning. It was right after I got the notebook in Portland, and we were heading over toward Nehalem Bay, and we stopped at a fast food restaurant, so we didn't always cook out. Remember this? We were outside.
Yeah, it was like...
Well, let's tell them what happened. We were outside, and there's this guy in this big old truck, and he's like revving his engine, and he's waiting in the drive-thru, and we're just kind of sitting outside. And the employee runs out to give the guys food, and the guy just starts cussing him out, and he's so mad he had to wait this long, and it was just like it was demoralizing. I felt so bad for the employee, and I walked over and I was like, "I'm so sorry that happened to you." And he goes, "Oh, that happens all the time," and just went about his day. It was just no big deal for him, and it was so hard to see. It was just so hard to see that this guy has to deal with this crap all the time, So I think we saw a lot of the greatness of America in so many ways, but we also saw a lot of more complex situations. Like there might have been racial overtones to that particular interaction. I guess I can't say for sure. But there were some troubling things we saw along the way. Again, one of the cool things about going with a 6-year-old is that, there were people we met at campsites or just, restaurants, museums who I imagine we didn't have the same political beliefs or really agree on a whole lot of those kinds of issues, but we both kind of read it in each other's eyes. Like we weren't going to go there in front of the kid. Like we would just find a way to politely work through a conversation and have a good day and call it a day, and I appreciate humanity going on, that we could kind of sort some of those more complicated issues, at least in the presence of a child. So that was kind of reaffirming in its own way.
So like all the people we met, like they were
they were cool, but there were a couple which we can discuss off camera, who I think were making sure we all had a good experience regardless of our potential differences. And we have one here. Hi guys, very inspiring. Oh, it's sweet and so interesting. You took your son. That should have given you a unique experience. I'm reading your book. Oh, well, thanks, Juan. That means a lot. It was the best 2 weeks of our lives. So his life, I know.
And number 7, that's confidential information.
Oh, how old is Henry now? That's confidential. We'll just say he is 40% older than he was when he was 6. You can do the math. Oh, Sean has another good one. Thanks for all these camping questions. It's fun to remember these moments. Did you camp before this trip? So were we camped?
We did.
I feel like these were two separate trips completely. We've definitely camped. You were probably a little newer to it. We used my old.
Did it like maybe once. But...
Yeah, I like camping. We did a lot of backyard camping. We did some indoor camping.
That we did.
Yeah, we did do that.
Like in our backyard.
Correct. And I really love camping. In fact, we used this old 2-person North Face tent I got in high school. It was kind of withering away by the end of our trip, but it was perfect. It was small. We just kind of squeezed in there. And we recently moved, and I have the tent. We were going to chuck it. I just couldn't bear to chuck it. You know, it was just such a good home to us, as long as we remember to stake down the tent.
Yes, that is the hat.
The hat that Henry is wearing is the lost hat. There it is. We have no earthly idea what this thing is. It looks like Tweety Bird, but it's not.
It's Twinkie.
Henry thinks it's a Twinkie. I don't know. We've had lots of hours of conversation trying to figure out what that was. Okay, let me back. Oh, we have these great questions. You all are awesome. I'm going to speed this up so we can get to all of them as best we can. Does Henry still illustrate and maybe write like his dad? Come on.
Kind of.
You were drawing upstairs like 20 minutes ago. Yes,
Except I'm really bad at drawing.
He's having a hard day at drawing, but he was on YouTube watching them sketch some stuff, and he was sketching along. And you were working on some fan fiction upstairs too. So.
Kind of.
Yeah, he's modest. But stay tuned for more.
I saw one about summer sausage.
Yes, there's working on that. You said we'll get to that. You said the Oregon Trail was the longest graveyard in the world, and one person died every how many yards, miles, feet? Yeah, according to OCTA, the Oregon California Trail Association, every 80 yards. 80 yards. And I mean, a lot of these stories are documented, and a lot of them aren't. So recently, or not recently, but I was trying to find some personal connection to some of the immigrants. And I don't think there's anything in my own personal history, but when we were in Oregon, we did see a grave, or like a recreated grave, from a woman from Fort Wayne, Indiana, which is my hometown. So that kind of allowed us to kind of more fully understand the complexities. But the deaths were real. I mean, I think the cowboy and Indian movies, so to speak, often try to portray this constant hostility, but in fact, there were 300 to 400 deaths on either side. And in fact, immigrants killed more Native Americans than vice versa. So, a lot of that more mythical stuff really complicates the reality of the story. And most people died of the diseases, so that's
not this like crazy shootout stuff.
Not really. It was mostly diseases, of course. Yeah. Where were the hot springs? Lava hot springs, right?
They were fun, but we were there for half an hour.
Yeah, but check it out. Lava hot springs. You should Google it. It was just I think it was called like Lava Hot Springs, might be the name of the town. It was one of those days where in Farson Mercantile, we'd met some woman, we were eating our ice cream, and she just took me aside, or I think she told both of us. It was like, if you're looking for something fun to do with a kid, go to Lava Hot Springs. And it was indeed worth it. I was driving there and I saw the sign for it, and I just thought we got to turn. We just got to do it.
And then you were like, we're gonna go somewhere. And I'm like, where? And then you're like, we're gonna go somewhere.
Surprise.
I was like,
everything was a surprise because it just helps with the anticipation. Carolyn asks, are you planning another trip adventure? It's tricky. Well, it's tricky because actually we are starting tomorrow morning. We're leaving for our actual in-person book tour, which I mentioned. So it's kind of the retracing of the retracing. Yep. So we're going to those places. I have 2 other children. So the dream was there are 3 trails and I have 3 kids. I thought we'd do Oregon Trail, then we could do the Santa Fe Trail, we could do the Lewis and Clark Trail, but my daughters seem less interested. So we hope to get some more future trails. Yeah, we'll figure it out. As long as Henry will come with me, I'll keep going. That's for sure. We'll get to that. Does Henry still illustrate and maybe write like his dad? Marilyn asks. So you kind of covered that, but you're still working on your craft, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, he's working on it.
Wait,
but
didn't we already answer that one?
That's a different version of that question, though. So yeah, it is fun if you do pick up the book. I can't stress, even the reviewers, everyone seems to be very charmed by his illustrations. They don't have too much to say about the writing, but they really like the illustrations. So no, it's a good team. Now he's going to try to show off some of the other drawings, some freebies.
Show how bad
Paul asks, how many days were you on the road and how many miles did you travel out and back? So there's some more. Good. We were on the road for 2 weeks. It was a whirlwind. It was an absolute whirlwind. And it's about 2,500 miles out here. We left Eau Claire and then we drove to Clive, Iowa that first day, and then off to Independence. And then we kind of kept going west, moving through Nebraska, which is a very big state, we learned. And of course, we hit up Kansas along the way, and then we moved over to Idaho and Oregon eventually, and Wyoming. So yeah, we actually flew back. Just my wife, I didn't think would let us off the hook for another 2 weeks to make the drive back. So we we went pretty quickly, but we soaked up everything we could during those 2 weeks, and then we kind of hightailed it back. Henry was very excited to have movies on a plane. We really did a great job of avoiding screens that most of that trip, which was the best part. And that's the thing I most hope we can keep doing, is just finding ways to spend time together, make some memories, make those miles memories.
I'd rather do that than be on a screen, but when it's 8 hours in a car
That's true.
there and back, it's like...
There's only so much to see. We get it. A few more here, and then we'll let you go on the day. Henry's very excited about this upcoming sausage question. Oh, yes. Hannah asks from Melissa Z, did the sausage taste good?
Yes.
Absolutely.
We also had summer sausage yesterday. That was really good. Can I have a piece
after this? If you do a good job. It took me back. Yeah, it was so much summer sausage. And I think it was because you have to put it in a cooler, at least for the start. And so I don't think you did. I don't know. But yeah, we made our way through all kinds of meat that probably wasn't the healthiest. David, did you use any electronics along the way? iPod, cell phone? Yeah, it was tricky.
I had 3 episodes of TV shows downloaded, and my dad had 3, and no, I had 1, he had 2, and so I just kept watching his Lost in Space 20.
That wasn't even mine. That was just on there. You were watching a Fuller House episode.
Yeah, I had the same one.
Yes, I remember it vividly, word for word. But in terms of the actual research of the book, I was required to kind of use some technology. So I did have my little, here it is right here, my little Zoom recorder, which I took with me for the interviews, and it was super helpful. And in fact, if you Google Go West Young Man, BJ Hollars Snippets podcast, you'll find a 15-minute podcast we made that actually has audio from that trip. And so I love to go back. Nothing makes me more nostalgic than hearing our voices, hearing the stream in Montpelier, kind of hearing and sharing the story in a more powerful way.
Oh, that hurt.
So that was kind of how we used technology to try to capture what we could. Of course, photographs were hugely helpful as I tried to describe scenes and all that sort of thing. So Will asks, what an adventure. Have you heard of Ezra Meeker? Absolutely. We love Ezra Meeker, right? The grandfather of the trail. We learned a lot about him. He was from Washington State and spent a lot of time doing some great...
must have not been listening to those museums.
Shocking. He traveled to Washington, here in the 1800s, became concerned that people were forgetting about the trail, and then retraced it, right? Yes, he got the idea of retracing the Oregon Trail, erected the stones, did this in the covered wagon with a pair of oxen. Yes, Will, we know that story well. And shockingly, you won't even believe this magic. I interlibrary loaned some books, and one of his books was his Oregon Trail book. And it was like an old brown leather-bound kind of copy that came in the interlibrary loan for me. And I opened it up, and it was autographed by Ezra Meeker. So that was really cool. And indeed, I think there's some photographs of him at the White House, trying to kind of bolster the trail for future generations. And he's really, he's someone that every museum we went to, he was someone that people kept looking up to in real ways. And I did too. It's so cool to try to draw attention to something we've forgotten about. And even the Oregon Trail, unless you are on the ruts, you can be on it for 100 miles and never have any sense of the people who came before you, and also the more complicated parts of that story as well. So just being mindful of the world around us and the land we're on, and what that means and what is taking place there in the past is always really interesting to us.
We took the card.
Yeah, and thank you all for being so generous with these questions. What was the toughest moment, and how did you go along with it? S1. What was the toughest moment?
The storm.
Storm was probably the physically just toughest moment. It was truly scary. I mean, I looked at my weather radar and it was just red everywhere. And this was our first real night of camping, and we were just so far from home and drenched and kind of scared, nowhere to run.
I think I probably didn't happen, but I feel like we might have said, should we just go back home?
It crossed my mind a time or two, but we just kept on. There were, I think, more kind of emotionally exhausting moments as well that we had to work through. I mean, this is a lot of time for 2 people in a car together. I wasn't the ideal, travel person probably, but all in all, I mean, it was so cool watching him grow. I mean, that first day, neither of us could put that tent together very well. Certainly Henry was kind of out of his league on that. But by the last day, I go off and, get the clothes washed or whatever, and I'd come back and Henry be pounded in the steaks, I feel like he grew up in a big way in 2 weeks. And that's just such a gift to see that actual growth in almost real time.
That's one of the only parts that I can actually do still.
Well, that's a big thing. That's not nothing. And Melissa asks,
did you travel through a car?
Yep,
yes,
did you travel? We did. We rented a
Bullseye.
A Jeep Compass called Bullseye. We named it Bullseye. That was part of the adventure too, because the Oregon trail immigrants, of course, always name their wagons. And so we had to come up with a wagon. And somewhere on a hot Nebraskan day, we were sitting there outside some church parking lot, just kind of catching our breath and stretching. And Henry came up with it. Bullseye was the name of our rental vehicle. And thanks, Sean. Yeah, we can't wait to come to Kansas. That'll be a good time. And Mike says, kudos to Mom for letting you take. Yes, exactly. And if she's watching or just upstairs keeping them quiet right now, Mike, you are so true. Absolutely right. That was a lot of work for everyone, and we probably had the more fun part of it on the road. Oh, I'm sorry. Melissa asked Montpelier, Vermont, Montpelier, Idaho, the other Montpelier. That would have been the more circuitous route for sure, but thank you for asking. Gosh, I think we hit them all. Do we have time, Diane, to read the last page, or should we call it?
Sure, yeah, go for it. We'd love to hear the last page. Yeah.
All right, we'll read the very last page and we'll call it a night. Thank you all for being such a great audience. One of the most robust question and answer sessions we've had, and I think that really made for a good time for us. So thank you for all those wonderful questions. So I'll just read the last page when we're getting home at the end of this journey. Loaded with luggage, we stumble into the living room to find our dog Cece heralding our return. She writhes and wiggles along the carpet, whimpering in what I like to believe is gratitude. It is the closest to a hero's welcome we'll receive, and it's more than we deserve. We have done nothing heroic, just turned off some screens, made a few new friends, and marveled at a rock or two. Climbing into bed that night for the first time in a long time, I don't worry about tent stakes, or rain flies, or inclement weather. All I worry about is the world we're missing while tucked safely in our beds. Placing my head on the cool side of the pillow, I think about Chimney Rock looming large in the Nebraskan moonlight, and of Scotts Bluff thrusting its rocky chin down toward the town. I think of the wind rattling our tent just outside of Casper, of Joel Hembree's grave standing tall among the weeds. I think of Rebecca Winters and handcarts and hot springs and ice cream and an eagle cutting through the clouds over the Pacific. I think about flashlight beams in Montpelier and the bar of soap we wore down to a sliver by trip's end. I think of the blue morpho butterfly in Boise and the swales and the ruts from the wagons that came before. Of fried fish, purple flowers, sand dollars slipped in a bag. But mostly I think about what Henry and I will never have again, such unencumbered togetherness and such love-fueled, laughter-filled ease. Well, my wife whispers into the dark, was it everything you'd hoped? More, I say, turning toward her. It was everything and more. Thank you all so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you so much, BJ and Henry, for sharing your story with us. It sounds like quite the adventure. And we really appreciate your taking the time to be with us this evening. And thank all of you for joining us. We hope you'll also join us tomorrow night. BJ will be presenting Travel Writing for Dummies on rattlesnakes, wagon ruts, and making the world feel like home. And then on Saturday morning, he'll be conducting a workshop called The Story of Your Life, Writing Your Forgotten Past. And you can find information about this and other library programs at jocolibrary.org events. And you can also find resources for writers at jocolibrary.org. We recommend for writers. Thank you all. Good night, and please enjoy the rest of your evening.
Yeah.
Bye.